the silent weight of expectation. There's a strange pressure that shapes all human behavior, a kind of invisible contract we never agreed to, but live by every day. Society teaches us how to smile when we're breaking inside, how to chase what others call success, and how to play a role even when the script feels wrong. These are toxic expectations, the moral demands, emotional performances, and social duties that force us into conformity. And yet, in the quiet rebellion of our hearts, there's an ancient whisper that says, "This can be used." Machiavelli would have heard that whisper, studied it, and turned it into a weapon. To Machiavelli, expectation was never just a social force, it was a form of control. In The Prince, he observed that people judge not by truth, but by appearances, that morality bends before necessity, and that the wise ruler manipulates perception to maintain power. What most people today see as toxic, Machiavelli would call predictable. He saw human virtue and vice not as moral categories, but as strategic tools, tools that can be leveraged if you learn to understand the psychology behind them. And that's the essence of the counterplay, turning the poison of expectation into the fuel for control. This video, or rather this philosophical map, explores how Machiavelli's mindset offers a counter-strategy to the burden of toxic expectations. It's not a call to deceit or cold ambition, but to self-mastery. Because when you stop being shaped by the demands of others and start using their expectations as a mirror to your own power, something changes. You move from the role of the expected to the role of the observer, from the prisoner to the strategist. This is how Machiavelli's counterplay begins. 1. The nature of toxic expectations. Every society is built upon a hidden network of unspoken rules, a moral code that dictates what success should look like, how one should behave, what emotions are acceptable, and when ambition crosses the line. These rules often masquerade as virtues: humility, loyalty, patience, politeness. But when applied absolutely, they become chains. Toxic expectations are not inherently evil, they are the natural outcome of human predictability. They thrive where the need for belonging outweighs the need for authenticity. Most people never realize that these expectations are self-reinforcing. The more one tries to meet them, the more they multiply. The friend who is always available becomes expected to always be available. The worker who over-delivers becomes the one who can never say no. The empathetic listener becomes the emotional dumping ground. Toxic expectations grow not from others' malice, but from a collective illusion, the belief that consistency equals virtue, and compliance equals love. The result is quiet servitude disguised as morality. Machiavelli would not have called this toxicity. He would have called it opportunity. Because expectation reveals weakness, it reveals what people want so badly that they cannot see beyond it. The more society demands moral consistency, the more those who play outside the moral script can dominate those within it. The truly strategic mind doesn't rebel loudly, it bends expectations until they serve its purpose. That is not cruelty, that is realism. And realism, to Machiavelli, is the only form of honesty that truly matters. 2. Machiavellian psychology of expectation. To understand Machiavelli's counterplay, we first need to understand his view of human nature. He believed that people are not guided by reason or virtue, but by desire, fear, and habit. Most men, he wrote, judge more by the eye than by the hand, meaning they prefer appearances over truth. This insight into the superficiality of judgment is the cornerstone of his strategy. It means that whoever controls expectation, the lens through which others see, controls reality itself. Expectations are psychological contracts. They define the space between what people believe about you and what you actually are. The Machiavellian mind doesn't try to destroy expectations, it manipulates them. By allowing others to believe what they need to believe, you gain freedom behind the mask. The art lies in strategic ambiguity, being seen as virtuous when necessary, feared when required, and misunderstood when beneficial. Expectation becomes camouflage. It hides power until power is ready to reveal itself. But there's a deeper layer here, one that turns this strategy inward. Machiavelli's wisdom isn't just about manipulating others. It's about mastering the expectations within yourself. Every person carries an inner tyrant, the internalized voice of society that whispers you must. To play the Machiavellian counterplay means to face that voice and ask, who benefits from my obedience? When you stop playing the game by their rules and start using their rules to design your own moves, you cross the line from subject to sovereign. And that's the moment toxic expectations lose their power over you. 3. The tyranny of social morality. Morality, at its core, is a social technology, a system designed to regulate behavior, maintain cohesion, and protect the fragile order of civilization. Yet Machiavelli understood what few dared to admit: morality is not universal truth, it is political necessity. Every society builds its moral code around the preservation of its dominant power structures. And when you internalize those codes without question, you become a tool of the very forces that restrict you. This is how morality transforms into a quiet tyranny, not through violence but through guilt. Society's moral expectations often masquerade as selflessness. Be kind, be patient, put others first. But underneath these noble words lies an invisible exchange, a trade of power for approval. You become morally good, not by being authentic, but by being compliant. The Machiavellian insight is to see morality as a mask rather than a mandate. It is a system of appearances that benefits those who can weaponize virtue. The good man is often a pawn, the righteous man, a performance. Meanwhile, the one who understands the function of morality, its role as social theater, can navigate it without being trapped by it. To leverage toxic expectations, you must first deconstruct the myth of moral obligation. Morality is not evil, but it is negotiable. It bends to necessity, and those who cling to it too tightly are often consumed by those who don't. Machiavelli's ruler does not reject morality entirely, he redefines it situationally. He acts morally when morality serves him, and ruthlessly when morality would destroy him. To modern ears, this sounds cruel, but to Machiavelli, it was survival. The recognition that power is not the opposite of virtue, but the hidden condition for it. 4. The counterplay: strategic detachment. Once you recognize the manipulative web of social expectations, the next move in Machiavelli's counterplay is detachment. Not detachment in the spiritual sense of apathy, but in the strategic sense of freedom, the ability to act without being emotionally enslaved by how others interpret your actions. The greatest power lies not in control, but in non-reactivity. Because expectation feeds on reaction, it survives through your compliance. Detachment starves it. Strategic detachment begins with observation. You start to see patterns, who expects what from you, and why. You begin to notice that people's expectations are rarely about you, they are projections of their own insecurity and desire. When you detach from the need to meet those projections, you stop playing their game. You become unpredictable, and unpredictability is power. It shifts the psychological balance. Others can no longer manipulate you through guilt, approval, or fear because your sense of worth no longer lives in their perception. Machiavelli's prince practiced this kind of detachment instinctively. He knew that to act effectively, one must appear compassionate but remain calculating, to seem devoted but be guided by necessity. Strategic detachment allows you to respond rather than react, to choose your role in every interaction consciously. It's not cold-heartedness, it's emotional discipline. When you learn to care selectively, you conserve your energy for actions that matter, and in doing so, you gain a kind of moral independence that most people will never experience. They'll call you selfish, but in truth, you've simply stopped performing. 5. Manipulating perception as power. If expectation is the architecture of social control, then perception is its currency. Machiavelli understood that perception governs reality more powerfully than truth ever could. Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, he wrote, for everyone can see but few can touch. This insight forms the foundation of modern politics, branding, leadership, even relationships. People don't respond to who you are, they respond to what they perceive you to be. To master that perception is to master the very framework through which power operates. To leverage toxic expectations, you must learn to reverse them, to use people's predictability against them. If the world expects you to be agreeable, choose mystery. If they demand your transparency, offer them only fragments. If they believe you to be harmless, let that illusion disarm them until the moment you decide otherwise. The goal isn't deception for its own sake, but psychological positioning. By controlling the image, you gain leverage over reaction. You dictate not only how others see you, but how they behave toward you. However, the danger of perceptional power is intoxication. The same masks that protect you can become prisons if you forget who you are behind them. Machiavelli's genius was not in pretending to be virtuous. It was in remembering that virtue itself is a performance when survival demands it. The key is intentionality, to wear the mask consciously, knowing when to remove it. Because while others are trapped in the expectations they must fulfill, the Machiavellian mind operates from a higher vantage, sculpting the stage, directing the play, and stepping off it untouched when the curtain falls. 6. The ethics of counter-manipulation. There is an inevitable question that arises when discussing Machiavellian strategy. Is it ethical to manipulate the expectations of others, even if they are toxic? The moral instinct within us recoils. We fear becoming what we despise. Yet Machiavelli forces us to confront a difficult truth. When morality is used as a weapon, responding with blind virtue only ensures defeat. Counter-manipulation, in this sense, is not cruelty, it is self-defense through understanding. The ethical value of strategy depends not on whether it deceives, but on whether it liberates. Machiavelli's world was one of betrayal, shifting loyalties, and moral hypocrisy. But so is ours. The workplace flatterer, the political influencer, the moral posturer online, all play their own forms of manipulation under the guise of virtue. The individual who refuses to engage with this dynamic out of naivete does not transcend it, he merely becomes its victim. Ethics, when stripped of context, becomes an instrument of control. The counterplayer, the one who understands expectation as a psychological force, uses strategy not to destroy others, but to reclaim autonomy from their projections. Still, there is a fine line between mastery and malice. Machiavellian ethics is not about deception for gain, but awareness for freedom. The moment you manipulate for dominance rather than defense, you fall into the same cycle of toxicity you sought to escape. The goal is not to play others like pawns, but to refuse being played. In this light, Machiavelli's counterplay is not an act of corruption, it's an act of evolution. It's the reclaiming of moral agency in a world that rewards performance over truth. 7. Realpolitik and modern relevance. Machiavelli's philosophy, though born in the blood-soaked courts of Renaissance Italy, finds new life in our hyper-connected age. Today, power no longer sits solely on thrones, it lives in algorithms, social networks, boardrooms, and curated identities. The toxic expectations that once came from monarchs and clergy now emerge from culture itself, from trends, opinions, and the invisible court of public approval. Every digital act is an act of performance. Every post an echo of the prince's central law: appear virtuous, even if you must act otherwise. In this modern theater, Machiavelli's lessons become essential. Realpolitik, the politics of realism, teaches that the world operates not by ideals, but by incentives. Those who cling to purity often find themselves powerless. Those who understand the system's mechanics can bend it toward purpose. To leverage toxic expectations today is to resist the coercive demand to be constantly available, likable, transparent, and compliant. It means learning to curate perception strategically, to show only what strengthens your position and conceal what weakens it, not because you are dishonest, but because you refuse to be consumed by the endless hunger of social validation. The tragedy of modern morality is that it demands perfection while rewarding illusion. People are not punished for being false, they are punished for being transparent in the wrong way. Machiavelli, centuries ahead of his time, offered a survival blueprint for such hypocrisy. He understood that authenticity without control becomes self-sabotage. To live effectively in the modern world, one must blend sincerity with discretion, honesty with mystery. The wise do not expose their souls to an audience that mistakes depth for weakness. They reveal only what advances their mission and guard the rest as sacred. 8. The psychological liberation from expectation. Once you master the dynamics of expectation, once you stop needing to please, explain, or justify, something profound happens: you become psychologically untouchable. This is the liberation Machiavelli hinted at but never named. It is the freedom of operating beyond the reach of judgment. When you no longer rely on external validation to define your worth, toxic expectations lose their grip entirely. You are no longer an actor in someone else's morality play, you become the author of your own narrative. This liberation does not come through rebellion, but through stillness. The Machiavellian mind learns that power is not in defiance, but in composure, in the ability to remain unmoved by the waves of expectation crashing around you. People may still demand your compliance, your attention, your apology, but their demands become noise rather than command. You move from reaction to intention. You act not to prove but to choose. This is not the cold detachment of cynicism, it is the warm sovereignty of self-possession. In that moment you realize that the true counterplay was never about others at all. It was about reclaiming yourself from the 1,000 invisible threads that society tied around your mind. When you stop chasing acceptance, power begins to orbit around you naturally, not because you seek to control others, but because you have mastered the rarest human art, the art of being internally governed. You no longer need to appear good, impressive, or moral. You simply are. And in that authenticity, even Machiavelli would bow in respect, not to the prince of others, but to the ruler within yourself. Conclusion: the prince reborn. Every era produces its own kind of tyranny. For Machiavelli, it was the brutality of politics, the shifting alliances, the treacherous courtiers, the moral hypocrisy of kings. For us, it is the tyranny of perception, the quiet enslavement of self to the expectations of others. We are no longer executed for our disobedience, we are exiled by silence, cancelled by judgment, suffocated by the soft power of collective opinion. But the essence of tyranny has not changed. It still seeks to own your choices, define your virtue, and dictate your worth. What Machiavelli offered the princes of his age, we must now offer to ourselves: the wisdom to rule within. To leverage toxic expectations is not to become cruel, detached, or manipulative. It is to reclaim authorship over the narratives that others impose upon you. Machiavelli taught that a ruler must appear virtuous, but act wisely, that he must bend appearances to serve his survival. In our time, this principle translates into psychological realism. You learn to balance transparency with discretion, compassion with firmness, and humility with power. You stop seeking to please those who misunderstand you, and instead cultivate an inner court, composed not of flatterers or critics, but of discipline, clarity, and purpose. This is the rebirth of the prince, not as a ruler of men, but as a ruler of self. When you reach this level of awareness, expectation ceases to feel like pressure, it becomes information. Every demand others make of you becomes a mirror of their own fears and desires. Every attempt to guilt or shame you becomes an opportunity to practice sovereignty. You begin to see that Machiavelli's true gift was never manipulation. It was lucidity. He stripped away the comforting illusions of morality and forced humanity to confront the mechanics of power. And when you apply that lucidity inward, you achieve something far greater than influence. You achieve peace. Not the fragile peace of compliance, but the unshakable calm of mastery. The modern prince is not crowned by others, he is crowned by self-awareness. He walks through the chaos of expectation untouched, not because he rejects the world, but because he finally understands it. He knows when to bend, when to conceal, and when to strike, not against others but against his own illusions. To live this way is to play the grandest counterplay of all, to transform what once enslaved you into what now empowers you, and as the mask of toxic expectation falls away, you emerge not as the puppet of perception, but as its author. That is how the Machiavellian mind wins, quietly, completely, and without apology.